Johnny. It has like Angelica, Chucky. It has everyone. Let's get started. Halloween 1981. 76-year-old nun Sister Tadea Benz of St. Francis Convent in Amarillo, Texas. She had been raped, strangled, beaten, stabbed in the second floor of her room in the convent. And so, no, this is not like the nun, like the scary, like the Conjuring thing. So, no, it's not from that. But, you know what's really, really awful is when I was looking up this case, pictures of like that scary nun from The Conjuring would just like pop up, and then under it would have her story. So police end up arresting 17-year-old Johnny Frank Garrett for the murder of Sister Tadea Benz on November 9th, 1981. This case was and continues to be controversial because Garrett was mentally impaired. He was a juvenile. He was psychotic. He had brain damage and a long history of abuse. Police arrest him because they had found fingerprints at the scene of the crime, so in Sister Tadea's room, and so they arrest him. He also lived right in front of the convent, so his house was right in front of the convent. So Johnny ended up going to trial and was convicted of the murder of Sister Tadea Benz. And during the trial, none of his history had been brought up. And Johnny had like an extensive, horrific childhood abuse. This poor kid went through it. And none of this was presented to the jury. So Johnny had a long history of childhood abuse. He had been beaten and raped by his stepfather, who had also sold him to another man for sex. By the age of 14, he was forced to be in pornographic movies and forced to do very bizarre, awful sexual acts against his will. He was introduced to alcohol and drugs by the age of 10 by family members. Because of that, the heavy use of drugs, especially paint thinner, affected him and caused a lot of the brain damage as well as the severe beatings. He had been burned severely. He had been pressed against a stove, which caused a lot of intense scarring from the burns. And so he just had like a really awful childhood. And on top of that, you know, he was mentally impaired. He was psychotic. He was delusional. And so, I mean, this kid just, this awful history of abuse, it wasn't presented to the jury. So the jury had no idea about all of this. And so he ends up getting tried and convicted of Sister Tadea Benz's murder. After he's found guilty, he's sentenced to the death penalty. And a lot of people are upset about the execution. People are like, this is completely unfair. It's the topic of human rights groups. I mean, it continues to be, because they're like, this kid is underage. He is mentally impaired, and you guys are giving him the death penalty. And so the state of Texas, so this happened in Texas, the state of Texas is like under heavy fire for the death penalty that they gave to Johnny Garrett. His original execution date was set for January 6th, 1992, but Pope John II actually asked for clemency for Johnny. So he had asked for this kid. He was like, no, like, please, clemency, some mercy on this kid. And so Johnny Garrett was awarded a 30-day reprieve of his sentence. At the clemency hearing, at the Texas Board of Pardons and Parole, none of his history of abuse was brought up. They had witnesses that said, experts that said that Johnny, although technically insane, or technically, you know, mentally impaired, knew right from wrong, and they ended up unanimously voting to continue with the execution. Which, I mean, you can't have it both ways. I don't know, right? So they unanimously vote. And so then Johnny Garrett was executed by lethal injection on February 11th, 1992 at the age of 28. Johnny Garrett was young. He was mentally impaired. I mean, the history of abuse, one of the psychologists that had worked with him, or psychiatrists that had worked with him while he was on trial, and he said that Johnny had one of the most worst cases of abuse that he had seen in all of his years of practice. And that says a lot. I mean, I'm not making excuses. I'm not saying that what he went through gave him any kind of right to do anything to anybody else. But I think that the jury should have been allowed to hear at least this side of the story, at least all of the abuse he went through. Because, I mean, maybe if they did, and let's say he's guilty, he is mentally impaired, he has all this history of abuse, I'm not saying let him go free and just like be like, you know what, well, because of this, like, you get a pardon, you don't have to go to jail. No, but like, maybe like not give him the death penalty or something. I don't know. I just feel like for it to be more of a fair trial, they should have brought up this history of abuse. Again, I'm not saying or justifying or saying because he was abused, then that gives him a free pass to murder and rape. No, it does not. I'm just saying that it should have been brought up in trial. So Johnny's final meal was ice cream. And I don't know why. Like, that just seems like that's your last meal and he's just like, let me get some ice cream. And so his final words were, words for his friends and his family. And then he said, everybody else can just kiss my ass. However, this case of Johnny Garrett has been very criticized, heavily looked at by a lot of victims' rights groups and human rights, and criticized the state of Texas for executing a mentally impaired individual. I mean, if he was mentally impaired, did he deserve the death penalty? I don't know. You guys tell me in the comments below. What do you think? You think he should have still gotten the death penalty? Do you think he should have been given at least a little bit of leniency and given life in prison? I don't know. Everybody has their own opinion. Garrett's fingerprints were found in the convent. And so there was evidence pointing to him. However, Garrett always denied having committed the crime. He said he was not responsible for the rape and murder of Sister Tadea. Which if he wasn't, then what are his fingerprints doing in her room in the convent? Like, what are his fingerprints doing there? I don't know. However, there was another man, Lencio Perez Rueda, who was a Cuban immigrant, who had been arrested and charged for the murder and rape of 77-year-old Narnie Cox Bryson. And in a recent interview, Lencio had said that he had raped and killed a nun in the summer of 1981. Narnie's rape and murder happened in July 1981. Sister Tadea's rape and murder happened October 1981. And so it is possible that Lencio had something to do with this, right? It kind of fits an MO. They were both elderly women. They were both raped and murdered. A lot of people think that isn't just a coincidence. The time span, it also happened in Texas. He was kind of in that area, and it happened not too far apart, and the victims were similar in age. He very well could be. And he himself in an interview said like, oh, he had raped and murdered a nun. Now, that could be that he read that somewhere in the paper, read that somewhere, and now is just saying that. I don't know. In 2004, there was DNA that linked Lencio to Sister Tadea Benz's death because they had found some DNA evidence in the room. And so now it is possible that Lencio had something to do with the nun, with Sister Tadea's death. I don't know. Both his DNA and Johnny Garrett's DNA was there. So it really could have been either. I think that if that crime had happened nowadays, I think we'd have a lot of a better idea of who did commit it. I will say if it was not Johnny who had committed the murder, then that is just a disgusting miscarriage of justice, because he was so young. He was 17 when this murder happened. He was mentally impaired. He had a long history of abuse. Again, not excusing anything. But if he was innocent, then that, you know, is just disgusting. You know, that he would have been executed. If he was guilty, then, I mean, what are you gonna do, you know? I think I can't say that Johnny did not murder Sister Tadea, because his DNA, his fingerprints were at the scene of the crime. He lived across the street. He was psychotic, and so maybe something could have happened. I don't know. But I think Lencillo could also be responsible. His DNA was also found at the scene of the crime. He had been arrested and convicted of a very similar crime. Again, both ladies elderly in age, both raped and murdered, both in 1981, not too far apart from each other. So I think he's a possible suspect as well. I don't know. I really don't know. Like, it could be either of them. Maybe Johnny had been to the convent just because he lived across the street and he would just visit. I don't know. Maybe he did murder her, you know, or maybe Lencillo did. I don't know. I know that I was reading that Johnny Garrett's family has been working to try to clear his name of the murder, because they feel that he was not the one that raped and murdered Sister Tadea. Maybe Lencillo has something to do with it, maybe not, you know, but they are trying to clear his name. I don't know, this one's tough, guys. This one's tough because it could honestly be either of them. Just because you're psychotic doesn't mean that you're a murderer and a rapist, right? Like, logically, it would make sense that somebody that already confessed to being a murderer and a rapist is a more likely suspect than somebody who is not and is mentally impaired. And, you know, but I don't know. He could have just had a psychotic break in the moment and raped and murdered her. I don't know. So let me know what you guys think. This was a shorty, just a little one for you guys. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know what cases you want to see next. I know some people have told me that I should do Joseph Fritzl next. So that will be coming soon, so just keep a lookout for that. So if you like all things crime, give this channel a like, a subscribe, and let me know in the comments what video you guys want to see next. Bye!